Oh, I think we're ready.
Mr. Tate, we're live.
Thank you, Ms. Frederickson. It is March 17, 2022. This is a meeting of the Council Rock School District Board of School Directors Facilities Committee. And we'll go around the table and introduce ourselves, starting with, I'm co-chairing facilities and chairing tonight. We'll start with co-chair Michael Roosevelt.
Michael Roosevelt, School Board.
Matt Frederickson, IT Director.
It's Salem School Board.
Forward School Board.
Bob Hickey, School Board.
Mary Ann McKee, School Board.
Doug Taylor, Director of Operations.
Andy Sanko, K-12 Director.
Sue Elliott, Substitute Superintendent.
Thank you. We'll start with a security update. And Mr. Taylor, please.
Yes, thank you. So we do have Mr. Sanko with us tonight, Dr. Sanko, who is Director of K-12 and Security. And I'm going to kick it off. About 2019, we had talked about some of our systems becoming obsolete. And I guess just recently, they phased out support of our
Card access.
system. So because Revo's phased it out, we're not able to get the components that we need for it down the road for repairs. We are putting in systems in these new buildings that aren't necessarily compatible with new stuff. We're using the Revo equipment that we can. Some of the components we're putting in do have the ability to be expanded so that we're not wasting money. But we're not putting in all of the equipment that we could if we were to move forward with the new system. So we're working on, in alignment with our strategic plan, to get prices to replace the system, replace the access control system, which is the key fob system only, to replace the surveillance IP camera software system, the tie-in to it, and the considerations are Genetec, S2, and Wave platforms. We did get a price from our vendor that we use all of the time, Access Security, but we are looking at another number because the cost of this is pretty significant, so we didn't want to just move forward and assume our number was good, but we believe it will be when we're finished doing this. But the advantage of it is that we can use our video analytics on our time-lock cameras, which we can't use today because our system doesn't allow it. We can seamlessly integrate the intrusion alarm panel, communication access control, burglar alarm system with a new system, so we can have one system and not different vendors. Interoperability between access control and burglar alarm, and we should be able to save some cost on future equipment because it's non-proprietary. So it's an open platform which will allow multiple manufacturers instead of just sticking with the brand that we have.
Real quick, when I hear open source, I think crowdfunded.
It's not open source,
Okay.
it's open platform.
Okay.
There's a difference.
Good.
Sorry, so.
Oh, no, it's okay.
Yeah, but at this point, I mean, so Andy, Matt, and I are all working on it together because I had this in my old life as a security guy, was working on it, shared that knowledge with Andy, and Matt certainly is involved from a technology standpoint and a security standpoint. So we anticipate having numbers hopefully next week from the other vendor, and then we'll have time to analyze those numbers, and then we'll return to you and review the options and the actual costs and the considerations.
Doug, is there a big difference between the companies? I mean, I've worked with Genetec before. It's a great system, but it's hugely expensive,
It's very expensive.
Yeah.
But, and just to augment a little bit of what
if you don't mind.
Doug said, the whole reason this is an issue is because Revo discontinued the system that we're using now. They now want us to use their cloud platform. If it was a simple switch from the software on the server to the cloud, we would consider it.
Right.
The problem is the technology that we have in the buildings doesn't support their cloud platform. So it's a whole uplift to the system. And since we have to replace the panels anyway, we investigated what are our options. And what we're being recommended by not just one, but by another vendor, is that we go with an open platform solution that works with 15 or 16 different systems. Then we're not locked into a specific vendor. We're looking at Genetec, we're looking at S2, we're looking at Wave. They are not cheap systems, but we're looking at the total integration and what will give us the best bang for the buck now and in the future. And that's the other reason why we kind of want to move to the open platform when we're replacing the hardware.
That was going to be my question. By going the open platform, that means you don't have to replace a lot of hardware that's already in the schools from a variety of manufacturers.
We do now have to replace, regardless of what we do. If we go to the Revo system, there's probably 65% of the panels have to be replaced because they're not compatible if we did the upgrade. Since we're going to have to replace them, and since we're not doing the upgrade, we're going to have to replace them anyway with whatever system we pick. So instead of picking a proprietary system, we're going to go with an open platform for the hardware, and then the software makes it a lot easier for us to choose the software.
How long do we have the system now that's going out of service?
The Revo, 12 years maybe?
I believe that it's been a long time.
It's been a while. We've had it for a while.
I just have two follow-ups for my initial question. Is this, did we talk about this before COVID?
We did.
We're just bringing this back around?
Yes.
Or are we adding to what the thought process was that?
We're really revisiting it.
Okay.
We're revisiting it with a couple more options than we
Right,
had first.
okay. Because at the time, we were moving to Genetech.
We were looking just at Genetech.
Just at Genetech,
And the
right?
vendor that we deal with, Dan, from Access Security, basically said, you can do that, but you really need to think about long-term,
Mhm.
are there other options that will give you a better bang for the buck moving forward? So we decided we'd look at different options.
I'm glad this is kind of what Mr. Ting talked about in the policy meeting. We're revisiting things that were really on our agenda 2.5 years ago.
Yeah.
It's good. So I appreciate that. Do we have any sense of price tag at this point?
Do you have it on your slides?
Of what?
Price tag?
If any
No,
sense?
because we're waiting for the other numbers. I didn't really want to come with
That's
past
fine.
information.
Yeah, I mean, this is not going to be, it's going to be a heavy lift. Yeah, I think the board needs to know that, this is the way to go. It's going to come with a price tag.
There's options, but yeah, I mean, it could be several hundred thousand.
Yes.
It's not tens of thousands, it's
Right.
hundreds of thousands.
And Jason has built this into the projections. The
Good.
security upgrades are part of the scenarios with the budget projections.
Good.
Good stuff.
Should we go in cloud-based then?
We're not sure yet because we haven't decided on the solution.
You know my feeling on clouds, as soon as you put it in the cloud, you don't know it. So
That's-
it may or may not be a problem, but you don't control it.
Right. So we are looking at that as a potential
And I'm
solution.
just thinking from a legal standpoint, there's
Yeah, because we've been challenged by, we've needed footage from things, and then we needed to take an entire server offline to provide that information. And it takes that giant piece of hardware, which is a lot of money away, and we have to find a way to supplement it while it's away, where other options may allow us to do it differently. So we'll talk about all those things together.
And that was my follow-up, is if you're going to source it like we do now, you ought to price a couple of spare NAS servers for this, so that you just have redundancy for those kind of things.
We've
We're
talked
seeing
about that. We like the cloud solution only because it takes all of that hardware costs off our plate. But as you said, we need to be able to control the data, we need to be able to control access, we need to be able to replicate when necessary, so.
Yeah, these are movies of minors. I mean, that's the part problem with cloud-based systems. So.
So just for clarification, this is, Jason already figured it into next year's.
Correct.
budget, okay.
Yeah, as an estimate of about how much. Yeah.
So he's got a ballpark for it?
Yes.
Great, okay. Thank you.
So we have a couple other purchases that we would like to move forward with through Access Security that are included in Andy's security budget already. So this is money that we've already have in the budget, in our approved budget. Twining Ford Road Maintenance Facility, do you want me to go over these, or do you want to?
Sure, go ahead.
I don't want to take it.
You're doing just fine.
Twining Ford Maintenance Facility is one of our only facilities that doesn't have cameras. We think we should have the cameras at all of our facilities. It's worthy of cameras. So we're looking at adding 4 cameras to that site to make sure we capture the entire site. Exterior cameras at North Synthetic Turf Field. While we do have some cameras that see it right now, ideally we would have cameras that are at the stadium proper. So that provides us with 7 cameras, and we have a support system for it at the press box already. So we have the ability to grow at that a little easier than at the south stadium. So we see the south number is 7 cameras. It's additional cost because we have to get wireless installation out to the field so we can put the cameras around that field. That's why there's a difference in cost. And 2 more. The Newtown Bus Garage, even though we lease that property, we do have buses there, and we use that for our central warehouse. So it would be good for us to get card access to the door so we can control, we can see who's using that facility. And a couple cameras in the event something does happen there. It benefits us to make sure that the buses are safe. And this equipment is ours, so if we end up moving away from there down the road, we can take the equipment with us. So it's not, doesn't become, theirs. So the total cost for all of the stuff we just looked at is around $69,000. And again, that's money that's in Andy's budget already.
The card access to the main entrance to which?
That's to the bus garage.
Bus front?
Yeah. Sorry.
No, sorry.
No, 2 points. One, I hate talking about cameras in public.
I do too.
I do, I can't, but that's just me being me. Why didn't we set this out when we did the turfs? Why didn't we add this as part of the package?
We could have. We purchased it separately anyway, so it really wouldn't have been included as part. Even with the schools, all of the cameras we purchased, we go directly to Access Security, purchase them, and we have. So all we're doing there is the electrician roughing in, and then the cameras are purchased by us, installed by us, and commissioned by us.
So we're set to go, we just need to.
We're set to go.
Okay.
Because we don't have a network at South, we're going wireless regardless, and we're already set up at North.
Right. Okay. Great, thanks.
Yep. Any questions on that, or Andy, or?
Good job, Dr. Senga, thanks.
And energy management, we continue to see the numbers trending up, which we fully expect based upon where we've locked into some good rates, and thankfully we locked into the rates we did because the costs have gone way up from where we locked in. But that's the base rate. There's the other rates that come with any utility costs. The transmission rates, the taxes, the tariffs, whatever else is built into that electrical rate or gas rate is in addition. And the numbers are increasing rapidly. So we're up from 90 cents to 97 in November. And we have 2 buildings that we said we were looking at, Hollandale and South, which, as you can see from the graph, the bars, we're out pretty far in front of the other schools in terms of energy use index. So we got to reel those back in, and I'll touch on those momentarily. Here you can
Bottom
see
one, Doug, yeah, lowest one there.
that's Chancellor Center. That's another that we have to take a peek at. But because of the sizes of the buildings, the focus was more on the 362,000 square feet and the 72,000 square feet. And this is the December, which is going to trend because these are always a couple months behind by the time we get the utility bills. And the most recent one we have is at $1. It's up from 90 cents to $1 on the energy costs. Now, the increased ventilation requirements, I think, is something we can start looking to reel back in. We do have the needlepoint bipolar ionization, so that's going to help us in that regard. Current supply market conditions and PECO's transmission and distribution rates have increased. There's nothing we can do about that. Higher utility bills for the foreseeable future. Return to normal operation sequence, hopefully for this next school year. And we've done that study to North and South. Today we actually had a call with Aramark to review some of the things we could do with those 2 schools. So we're going to start preparing an action plan. Some of those are simply our HVAC specialists going into the controls and making adjustments in the controls and some of the things that we found. Some runaway fans, some runaway equipment, that's some trending of lights that we're having problems with in terms of the plan, the actual lighting controls in those buildings. So we're going to reset some of the timing of those controls. And some of it is, equipment purchases we'd have to make changes. So we'll look at the low-hanging fruit and what we have to do. And some of it's probably worthy of considering, because by the time you make those changes, the cost that we're spending for the excessive energy would likely be offset quickly. So we'll work on those. We actually have guys working on the controls this Saturday to take care of some of the issues that we found. And I will report back with the actual findings on those. Facility improvement project updates. These are pretty simple in terms of Hillcrest. Essentially, we're on track for this July 2022 completion at Hillcrest. The moving RFP is out for proposals. I expect to get those the end of the month. And we did, just for the sake of if the Richboro Elementary School project is going to be considered to be moved, I have an alternate bid for that move. So we had it captured just in case. And in either case, we can find out what the cost will be for down the road, so we know what the cost will be. At least we'll have a ballpark for our budgets. Not a lot to go through. We're doing well. The equipment appears as if it's going to be delivered on time. We're in pretty good shape for this building. Pico is getting us their transformer soon. We're waiting on them before we can fully energize things with the new power. Just a couple aerial shots of the site. Pretty cool shots of what's happening there. From a site standpoint, we will be reworking this for parking and additional drive-through if we need it. We have playground work here, playground work in the back, and then some other site work. All new mill and overlay on the parking lots as well. And just a shot from the back side. This is the new mechanical room. It is now weather tight, and they're putting all of their equipment in that room and getting everything tied in, making the terminations. And one last shot. So Stoll Finestone is also doing well. We had a meeting there on March the 4th, and Mr. Roosevelt and Mr. Tate.
Yoda was there as well.
Yoda was there.
Yeah.
Yoda was there. The meeting went well. We basically provided an update for the PTO in terms of what the next phase looked like, how it's going to affect the school, answered any questions they had, talked about environmental concerns, talked about anything that would affect staff or students. The meeting was about an hour.
Yeah.
And it was received well. We're going to return. We're going to set up a time to do the same presentation for teachers. And then when we get past this next phase and get ready for the next phase, talk with John about another community meeting. I'm happy to talk to the community about it again.
So are you the same things in planning for Hillcrest as well?
For
Meeting the PTO, meeting the staff, meeting the community?
we certainly can. You know, that the project's a little different in that we talked about what it would look like, and it's just a single year finished. Because this has multiple phases.
Give it some thought. I don't know if, you know, I know the PTO over there is active and excited. I'm not going to go out of my way to reach out to them, but I just consider it the offer.
I'm happy to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll talk to the
Then I'll be more than happy to get in touch with them.
Yeah, I was going to say, talk to the principals.
Yeah, I'll talk to the kid. And
It might be nice. I mean, it'd be great for them to see it. It's a long time coming.
Yeah, we can give them some updates and
Yeah.
talk about what it's going to look like when the move happens, how it all looks. That's
Great.
fine.
Thank
It's a
you.
good idea. Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, of course, Stoll Finestone was particularly important because of the phases.
Oh, yeah.
And I think reassuring the parents that it's all being managed well. And they asked a lot of questions.
Yeah, good questions.
It was a good meeting.
This project, we're doing well. Equipment deliveries are always an issue. We look like we're getting all of our equipment on time. We finally have dates for the fire water storage tank, the fire pump building, and I have a couple shots of what's going on there. But you can see that's the new two-story addition. In good shape. We have the brick up, we're waiting for metal panels. Windows are going in. Again, this is the site where we moved a lot of earth, took some fields away, put some underground drainage in, and this is where the new bus drive will be. They'll come in, they'll come around the site, and they'll drive down this area and back out. And parents will be using this other lot separately. So we'll have two clearly defined entries and drop-offs for buses and parents. And just a couple more shots of from above. This shot is important because this is the water storage tank excavation. It's about a 15 to 20 foot deep hole that we have to dig. We're basically burying like a train boxcar. It's a 30,000 gallon tank that holds all of the water for the fire suppression system since we don't have public water on this site. And what's interesting about it is this is a good example of value engineering and alternates that you trusted me on in terms of accepting an alternate bid for unclassified rock excavation. And people say, well, why do I want to pay a lump sum for rock removal when I don't know if I'm going to hit rock? But we do our homework, we do geotechnical studies, we figure out where rock may live, we quantify what it may be, and then when we get the bids, we take a look and say, well, if we hit 60% of the rock we anticipate, we're going to pay for this. So it's worthy of considering. So basically the contractor said for $26,000, I'm going to do all the rock removal on the site, I can't ask you for any money, that's what you're going to pay me. If we hit no rock, he makes $26,000. If we hit twice the amount, he loses $26,000. If we hit 26,000 worth, it would be great for everybody, right? The bottom line is, just at this tank alone, there's about 233 cubic yards of rock, at $135 a cubic yard in his unit price. The cost would have been for us $31,000 to excavate the rock for this tank. But because we paid the 26, we're actually, $5,500 ahead. And we anticipate hitting more rock and some of the other utilities in the grease trap down the road. So that's just an example of an idea. Just put a lump sum number in the bid and you do your homework and hopefully you do well. So we did well. The Richborough Elementary School project, it was requested that we bring this back, listed options A, B, and C, whatever level of discussion you want to have, fine. I can quickly review it. It's basically the numbers that were shared with the board in an email last week. Option A, we already know, and what I said for the sake of the discussions tonight is if there was any consideration, the farthest we could go with that would be next Thursday for a special meeting. Past that, we're really kind of cooked on that idea to move it ahead early. The idea was a good idea to try to move it ahead early because we would save some monies on a project that is going to cost us significantly more than when we did it last year. However, option B takes into consideration that you did get proper GIS numbers and you need time to study those numbers to see if there's an impact from that study on the size of this building. So recognizing that, we would need some direction by, let's plan it. Plan B, we would need some direction from the board by the 5th of May. So that allows you some time to look at the study to see if we want to consider any potential additions to that building. And even though we'd be approving it early in May, we'd still be looking at a July of 24 completion because it would require a 6 to 9 month approval process if we added any space to the building. We'd have to go back to land development through conservation district and seek all of those approvals again. So we kind of re-triggered, and depending on the size of the additions, if it's 20% or greater, we'd have an Act 34 hearing in the room next door. None of that's a problem, but it just adds time to the project. And then option C is if you look at the Crawford study and you don't need an addition, and we're going to stick with the plan we have, and there's still a desire to move the project forward. I've always said an October, November bid would be ideal, but even better would be to consider bidding it if you know you want to move this project forward. Shortly after you look at the Crawford study and determine you don't need an addition. The sooner the better so we can procure materials. We're running into a lot of problems getting materials for projects. We just found out today, for example, that the generator for sulfidestone, which we absolutely need, is not coming out until September. But the good news is we've rented a generator to manage the building as part of this last phase. We have a generator on site that we can still use and still get our approvals. If we hadn't, we'd be in a bit of a pickle trying to find a generator. So option A, B, and C are all viable options. I've just done a total summary page of those. The early bid option A, possible savings, yes. Could there be possible savings for option B? Well, there could be if you decide you need an addition. and we built something without it, it would certainly be more costly to then go back and try to, increase the size later. And option C, minimally, with the June bid, you can still save some money by getting it out earlier and not waiting until October, November of that year. Allows reaction to enrollment study, option A, it certainly doesn't, C doesn't, but B does. So that makes sense for B. Requires land development, only option B. Increase professional fees. Option B certainly would, because the design team would have to go back and design a new, addition and land development. Option C does not. Act 34 hearing, maybe for option B. Impact the project schedule. Option A approved it. It remains as planned for B and C, essentially. We can still finish later. It would be a 23 to 24 project and finish around the same time as Silk Limestone. The ACE grant does apply to option A. It applies to option C. And I think option B, it would apply, but since we're changing the size of the building, we may have to resubmit, which then could raise some questions relative to, we gave you these monies based on this project, now you're changing it to that project. I really can't tell you if it would or wouldn't, but none of these have been submitted for an extension request because we don't know what we're moving forward with. Board action required, option A would be the 24th of March, 5th of May, and June of 22 would be ideal, latest like October of 22. Project completion, this gets us an early finish of December of 23, and these are both July of 24 as planned. And then estimated budget impacts, option A, we looked at potentially 5.5 million more than when we had planned it. Option B would be about 10 million, it'd be 6 million because we're bidding later, plus about 4 million if you assume the 5-classroom addition, just to give you some idea. That's 10 million because we're adding construction size to the building. And option C, around 6.7. So those are the options. That's, Rich Burwell, and at some point, just let me know what the plan is.
Doug, can I ask a question?
Yes.
So I think it's fair to say that, at least from my perspective, we just got the proper study and it's a lot to dive into. Why, if we're leaning, or the board majority seems to lean towards B, why do we have to wait till May if we can turn that thought process around in the next 2 or 3 weeks?
Oh, you can turn it around in a couple of weeks. That'd be even better.
So we, in theory, that May is basically a drop dead date for you?
Yes.
Okay, I just want to be clear. I think that's important for the community because we have received emails. They want it done now. We all want it done now. I don't think anybody is against the issue. Is now the time, today, next week, to move forward on this without looking at the study in depth. So my question, and you have answered it, is that these would be drop dead dates. And in a lot.
May is drop dead date for B adding additions.
Okay.
But if we decide even in a couple of weeks, option A becomes a challenge. It still likely becomes a July, a 23 to 24 project. We do everything we can to try to consider the other, but the schedule to keep a December of 23 completion is really within a week or so to get that option. I understand it's difficult because the Cropper report came just recently, so it puts you in a hard,
Well, it does, but I think we got to do this. We know it needs to be done. I don't think there's anybody in disagreement. The key is where the board feels. The question is, do you feel that building needs additional classrooms for a myriad of ideas, or is the building good enough to move forward? I think that's the question we'll have to ask. I have my own opinions that I'm sure I will be happy to voice, but I just wanted clarification as we showed this slide that the community understands why we're at these dates.
Yes.
All right.
You're at the dates for good reasons,
Yeah. But they need to hear that.
Yeah.
From you and from the team,
Yeah.
and because the board has been asked by 5 emailers, do it today, do it tomorrow, we need it done. If it was your kid, your school would be done. Well, yes, but there's a couple of flies in the ointment why you may not be able to move forward.
I'm trying to give
Today.
as many options as I can.
Right, and I appreciate that, but I think that's why we all.
Yeah.
It's basically rush in 7 days to buy yourself basically only a half, 6 months. It's rush to get done literally only 6 months early. So,
And what happens when we rush construction?
I would not rush construction beyond a timeline that I would be comfortable. That's why I say if it doesn't happen next Thursday, then I cannot recommend option A because.
We're not making fun of you, though.
Yeah.
A couple questions. One is probably just lack of my knowledge. What is Act 34?
Act 34 is basically if the size of your building exceeds 20% of if the addition exceeds 20% of the existing floor plan, then you need to go have a public hearing and explain to the community. There's a stenographer, it's a formal hearing, and you're explaining the need for the project, the need for the additional square footage, so that community can come and they can voice their opinions, support, perhaps not support.
So if you only added 2 buildings, you wouldn't require it, or
If
2
you're-
rooms.
Right. So if you're under a total of whatever it is, but if you're under by a couple hundred square feet, you don't have to do it, right? I mean, it's just a matter of how much square footage we add to the building.
And as a follow-up to that, as we're talking about possibly expanding Richboro, and I'm not sure what the public aware of, the Soul Finestone renovation is adding new additional classrooms, correct?
That's correct. We've added 13 classroom addition, but the net add is 5 classrooms from the size of the existing building. The reason for that is there's a lot of spaces inside that are substandard, so we're making those appropriately sized classrooms. When we do that, it displaces classrooms. So the addition includes the classrooms that we're losing from inside, but then 5 additional that the building doesn't have today.
Yeah, so as we look at that, the Cropper study, and, that's something to take into consideration, that there will be possibly some extra room to, hate to say move students, but move students.
Yeah, we'd have to talk to Andy and Sue and team and find out if there's any current growth projected there. Is it 4? Is it still 5? I'm not sure, but it was planned to have 5 additional classrooms from the size that it was before we started.
Thanks.
Other questions?
Good.
I got a couple, Doug. What accounts for the difference under board action required for option B and C? We have until June 22nd for option C, but only May 5 for B.
For option B, you have the latest 5th of May, because we have a 6 to 9 month approval process. That still then gets us out to bid, and it's a year.
Because of land use and.
Because of the, right. The option C, as Ed said, why can't we approve this before June or even before May?
Right.
Know that we aren't going to put an addition on, and we absolutely can.
Yeah.
But my point was, if we know that we're not going to go with option B before the 5th of May, it'd be advantageous to approve option A as soon as we can to get materials ordered and get people lined up and ready to go.
And what accounts for the price difference between A and C, the budget impact?
So when we put this budget together, we said this was based on the budget of going out to bid March 17th.
Got it.
And this is going out to bid potentially in October, which is many, many months down the road.
Yeah. Price increase.
And so it's just based upon, we won't know that number until we know the number.
Yeah.
Sure. But
It's going to be a lot less.
I hope it is. I hope it's less.
Just, I don't know the question
Bob?
popped up. Obviously, option A is at this point out. But I've been asked numerous times about the possibility of that Richboro Elementary community using the middle school for 2 years. I don't know what the total flavor is of the community. I think it's something that should be asked of them. But is there any advantages or disadvantages, and can it be done that Richboro Elementary, if need be, could use the middle school for 2 years and leave Richboro Elementary vacant for 1? Like without nothing being done other than maybe some,
So it's a good question, and the building itself and the classrooms themselves are essentially ready for an elementary school program. I think it's more a question of, does it make sense to move the kids and the staff in there for a period of 2 years? And I think that there's been some discussions about that potential. At least there was a discussion about the option A and a move in December. If that went another half a year, does it make a difference, you know? I don't know.
Yeah, the only discussion I had with Danielle was option A. So we didn't talk about a 2-year stay at Richboro Middle School.
But could we? Yes. Yes, and honestly, so I bid the moving bid with an alternate to move Richboro Elementary School this summer. So if that was something that was desired and it could be worked out, we're going to have a number from a moving contractor to do it. But we would have to really get on board with that soon, because Andy knows what it takes to move a school. Andy and I met each other through a construction project here when I first started, and we worked well together at Hollandale. So there's a lot of work to do in that regard.
So what's the
Why would you?
benefit? Yeah, that's
Why would you do that?
exactly.
Air conditioning.
yeah, it does. I mean, people have, I mean, I've had different.
Okay, all right,
You know, it's
because
just
there's no construction problem.
Correct. Basically, Richboro Elementary would sit
Okay,
dormant, if
Provide
nothing
air
happened.
conditioning
Okay.
for the year.
But yeah, you know, many people just said, look, I'll do anything just to have that air conditioning. And, you know, and I've heard the arguments from the other side that as far as disrupting these kids again, you know, moving them, they're just getting settled back into a routine and now they're going to get bounced. So I hear the argument from both sides, but just putting it out there.
Yeah.
The other piece, it's not a direct answer, but it's a consideration, is the Sol Finestone project is lengthy because the project is working around moving kids around the school as you're doing the work. Where here at Richboro, we have the advantage of not having to do that because there's an entire other school that's ready where kids could go while we're working on it. Whether it be A or C, which is effectively a facelift and some infrastructure elements, or maybe it's B where there's actual construction pieces going on. It helps the construction team because you're not working around kids.
that,
Yeah, I mean, I would say it's, both of those are total renovations. One includes, you know, more additions than the other, but even the bid that you're considering is a new entry addition, a new boiler plant, receiving area, and then the interior of that building would be treated the same regardless of what project. But it's an entire infrastructure replacement. So you're replacing life safety, you're replacing data, power, HVAC, you're adding fire protection systems to the building. So it's a 100% new terminal units throughout the building, LED lighting. So it's more than just paint and doors and things like that.
Just one follow-up again. Is there any danger of or risk of leaving the middle school dormant for a year?
The middle school, I lose sleep over the middle school and the systems, because if you've been in the boiler room there, you will see it. It's a tired building. We're doing work on the roof, for example, spring and fall, just to keep the roof watertight, because that roof is ready for replacement. But we're not going to spend money to replace a roof when we don't know what the future of that building is. So the HVAC equipment, we're still doing all of our preventative maintenance on everything. So we're doing everything we can to keep the building going. You knock it one way, you bang it another, and it runs real good. I don't know that I shut it down for the year, that we wouldn't be there. I think I'd keep the air on at a higher temperature. I'd keep everything kind of operating. I think I'd be nervous to shut it down for a year and then try to start it back up. So I think we would, we treat it like an occupied building, but in an unoccupied mode, so we keep the temperatures higher and things like that. I can't promise anything. It's like if I have a 1970 Vega with, it's turned over 4 times, will it make it to California? I don't know. I hope so.
Yeah, you said my concern is just moving the kids into a safe building, and what does that year of inactivity do to the middle school? I mean, I've heard really good things from all the schools that have been in there so far about, how it's been okay, and it's, so you have been piecing
It's
it
great.
together nicely,
It's one of our most efficient buildings, believe it or not. We run it by hand, and it has old pneumatic controls that leak like crazy. You can hear the air blowing throughout the ceilings, but those chillers run great. We put some protection on the front end so that if we get any kind of surges or storms, hopefully our equipment's protected now better than it was. The boilers are working, and we'll do everything we can to keep them going. We're going to continue to pay money to service those and do everything we can to keep it happy. So,
I would just posit, Bob, that occupied or unoccupied, where you're still taxing the system. You put kids in it, you're taxing it more. If it's going to fail in 2 years, it's going to fail. Either way, because with kids in it or without kids in it, we're operating it as if it's full. So.
even if I had to bring I'm sorry, go ahead.
That's it.
Even if I had to bring a temporary piece of equipment in and connect it to the boiler room to keep that building functioning, the extra year of construction to put modulars on a building would cost us, millions more to renovate the building. Because if we phase it, it's a 2-year project with modulars, you're moving kids in and out. You'd still be ahead even if I had to get a temporary piece of, equipment for the boiler plant on a trailer to keep that building going. It'd still be
Doug, you gotta remind me of something, because I just joined the board with the rolling mills bid came in. How was that bid, the new rolling mills?
How was it bid? It was
Yeah.
bid as a base bid with an alternate for, I think, 3 classrooms?
Four.
Four
Yeah.
off
We
the
approved.
back corner.
So why can't we send that type of bid out next week? To do Richboro with an option to add up to 10 classrooms? Is that viable?
Not next week. We certainly, if you said, here's the scope. We want an alternate for 10 classrooms. Then the architect has to document those 10 classrooms. The civil engineer has to show how it affects the site. There's additional impervious surface, and now our stormwater calculations all change because we're adding hard surface. That stormwater runoff has to go somewhere. As if it went into the grass, it permeates, but when it hits the roof, it's now discharged to something. So there's a percentage of impervious surface that you're allowed to have on a site. We may be already close to it, so we add those 10 classrooms. We probably have to go to zoning for potentially a variance on something like that.
So to clarify B then, B would be the bid with the classrooms, regardless.
B is a bid with some classroom addition, and it's extending the
So we can't just send this out to bid with a possible ability to add, with an option to add up to 10 classrooms?
not without going through that approval process.
You don't even have the paperwork to give to a contractor.
No,
Yeah.
but how quick, that would have to wait till
That's
May?
in 6 to 9 months. And
It's not days, it's
the 9 month is a conservation district piece, because that piece always extends all the way to the end.
Yeah, that Michael asked that question when we were talking last Friday, I think, about doing it as a bid option, and Doug explained then why. It's the logical, good question to ask.
Yeah.
The
But it's-
architect-
Because I think we all want it. I mean,
Yeah.
if you want it tonight, you want
It'd
it
be great.
yes, and then give me the à la carte 10 classrooms.
Yeah,
And how much is that
The
going
architect
to?
could probably turn those drawings around in a month, his team. But it needs more than that. It's those drawings, the mechanical, plumbing, electrical engineer have to go in and document all the changes in the building that go into those drawings. The civil engineer has to change the site drawings. how it affects stormwater, where we collect, we may have to add some extra basins. We're starting to cut into the hill a little bit at that point. So we may have some retaining walls along the base of the hill, some new storm drains, they tie in the storm, that goes to a basin. Is the basin now big enough? Maybe the underground stormwater management has to grow because of the amount of water we've added from the roof.
Is that your sense that's the best way to go out the back of the building? That's
Absolutely.
the right, okay.
Yeah. Yeah, we have two wings that are just hanging out there. Connecting them is ideal.
Right.
Because now you improve circulation, it'll be just like the Newtown Health facility.
As to the question of accelerating the relocation, I think we could ask Dr. Elliott to see how the staff in that building feels.
I mean, we can definitely ask and find out, a little bit more. I think to Dr. Senko's point, I think the original question was about the finishing early and the relocation in December of '23, but I don't believe we asked the question of would you be comfortable staying there for 2 years? So we can definitely reach out.
I can see it pluses and minuses.
Yeah, absolutely.
Good.
The other thing on my question that we asked is, I wasn't completely aware of where we were with the documentation. I understood that to some degree there was an option to do this in the future, and I didn't know how progressed that was. So you had mentioned that we did have an option for the intent to add more down the road at some point. And I didn't know if that was conceived when this project was originally conceived or not, because were you able to confirm whether we were oversizing some of our systems so that we had that capacity if we were to do that?
Not oversized, we have space for additional boiler, so if we need to add a boiler. It's hard to oversize because then you're not really balancing your system. But we have room to expand the boiler. We had planned to extend fire protection and HVAC to the end of a wing so that we could then connect that wing, the generator size, that if we had to put some emergency power in that end. So yes, so if sometime down the road, the board said, let's add 10 classrooms, you wouldn't have to find room in the boiler room. You could add that other boiler. You could use the ductwork.
That's my point.
Yes.
So that you don't have to rip apart what you just added in to do it over again.
That's correct.
We I think, did that at Hillcrest too, because Hillcrest is the same.
Yes, we did.
Yeah, and I think that was done with Newtown in the first place, right? And that facilitated the addition to Newtown.
Newtown happened in a weird way, because that building finished, and the next, I think it might have, within a year, or as the building finished, the 10 classroom addition went on, almost immediately.
And what interesting trivia, which are the three identical schools, Hillcrest, Richboro, and Newtown? And they were all built within 2 years?
Newtown was last. The others were 89, and that was like 90. 92.
Hillcrest and Richboro were 89.
Yep. That's why that one is following these in terms of projected for renovation, because it has a couple more years of life left before this 30-year.
Right.
Hey, just by the way, I believe Mrs. Marcel's on the phone. I got a text earlier, just so you know.
Okay.
Well, good. Let the record reflect that Krista Marcel is on the phone. I hadn't heard, sorry.
I have 30,000 questions, but I can avoid.
No, you can call me tomorrow if you want to
It's
talk.
fine. I felt compelled, based on some emails we've gotten, some community feedback, that at least the question I asked for the community, the last one was for me, because we all want the building done, and, the question becomes, does it make sense to add or not? And I think that's digesting the document we just received, and for the public's knowledge, again, the Crocker study just came in, we just received it yesterday. So there's 60 pages to that document. That's a lot to digest. So the board's not spinning the wheels. I think it's fair to say it's a lot to digest and have a conversation amongst yourselves. So thank you, Doug.
Okay. Capital project updates, everything. I'm just carrying this to show you anything that would change as we move along. One bit of news that maybe Matt can provide an update on is we are testing Wi-Fi at Holland Elementary School. which would be an ideal solution to antennas and transmitters throughout buildings, because I worry that that will eventually age out. We'll spend millions of dollars to do this to buildings, and those systems won't be functional when 6G comes or things change, or towers move. But Matt is doing some testing. Maybe you want to just touch on it briefly?
So we did the initial testing at Holland Elementary School. The way that the access points are set up in the buildings, they're split. There's CRC public, which is the same throughout the entire district, and then there's the private channel. So what we did on the public channel is we enabled the ability for cell phones to use that public Wi-Fi, if their carrier supports it, to make phone calls and to receive text messages. Now, each carrier has a specific server that they have to attach to. So we had to whitelist. So it took us about a month to get all those set up properly. And one of the gentlemen I hired, Don Bausch, has been spearheading this. And based on the traffic, and Joe volunteered his school to do it, based on the traffic that we've seen, it hasn't negatively impacted the Wi-Fi capabilities in the building as far as impacting the students or the teachers for the teaching. He's testing it right now in one of the high school cafeterias, and I'd rather not say which one, because if any kids are listening. So far, we haven't seen any issues there either. So we're testing it at Rolling Hills Elementary, and then we want to test it one more location where we've had historically issues with Wi-Fi. And once we've done that, the plan is that if things continue positively as they have, by the start of the school year, it will be enabled in all the buildings. So if a teacher or student has a cell phone carrier that supports Wi-Fi calling, to my knowledge they all do, we should be okay.
And you have a way to continue to blacklist everybody you need to blacklist.
Yeah, so say for example, someone has Joe's Wi-Fi or Joe's cell phone service, and we don't have an alternative, it's not going to work. So if we don't know.
What's the chance of that? I mean, technology, there's only 3 or so.
4 or 5 carriers we've got.
But they're all bouncing off each other for the
Yeah.
most part, right?
So we should be okay. But, all someone has to do is say, hey, I've got Joe's cell phone service. Here's the server they tell me. We'll just validate that with the carrier. And we're going to continue to monitor to make sure that it doesn't impact any other areas.
Cost effective,
It's very cost effective. It doesn't cost us anything.
that's even better.
So, and we're upgrading all the access points in both of the middle schools, both of the high schools. Well, you just helped me spend money on all that. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
So that should actually make things work a lot better in all of
Great to
those
hear.
buildings.
So that'll solve your problem, Rolling Hills, if this rolls out?
That would cause problems throughout the district, and but there were 2 that, were really challenging because of the concrete structure.
So this will be, would this be built into all of our new facilities moving forward? Yeah, that's great.
The other thing that it allows us to do is, part of our strategic plan also was a kind of a mass notification system as part of our ALICE program for communication. We can start to think, Andy can start to think more about implementing that program down the road, which would be fantastic.
This is basically a software solution as opposed to another hardware.
Correct.
I mean, we're using hardware, but it's an existing infrastructure.
Yeah. This is just a key tally of the summer project costs as we go, so that's just the starting numbers. You guys were made aware of this issue the other day. At North, we had the heat go down. When we said that there was a leak in an elbow, that's what the leak looked like. Pretty significant. We replaced the elbow, but you can see, as I said in my response to you, that there is some piping yet that has to be replaced, but we don't want to get involved in extending this closure of a school to do it. So this summer, when we're finished school, we have some sections of pipe that we have to take the insulation off of and take care of some pipe replacement. It's difficult to see when pipe is insulated like this, you don't necessarily know that the pipe is aging prematurely the way this one has. So we're going to take a peek throughout the entire boiler room and do what we need to do this summer.
You think this is going to be a bigger deal, Chuck, or are you going to fix,
It doesn't look like it. When we looked at this pipe, right down here, it looks like a brand new pipe. But as you get here, this was probably leaking and getting in between the insulation and the pipe for some time. and it just wore the pipe out. I mean, it looks worse on the outside because it starts to grow, you know.
They're just iron pipe, right?
It's catch.
It's just catch pipe.
Yep. And then there's one more credit change order for the window project here at Chancellor Center. We finally got that resolved. They had to come back and do some repainting of the building. We've been watching that, testing that. That's all past us now. So we're going to get this remaining credit back for that project. Wrightstown Bus Garage, this is just an update on the testing here, the required DEP testing. It all went through first student, and first student makes us aware of it, and then we respond to it. So what we're trying to do is get the notification changed that they just come right to us, because we're responsible for the site, even though it's not our building. Because we're leasing the building and it's being subleased by the bus people, we're accountable for what happens on that site. So we're trying to, not accountable if we know that the bus folks would cause an actual environmental spill, then they would be accountable. But we're responsible to demonstrate that the site is clean through this annual testing and reporting. So it's a no exposure certification. Even though we have some ongoing issues with total solid suspended solids and iron content, the state has extended our permit for another year through March of 23.
I mean, the iron could be coming out of the stone. Where's the solids coming from?
The solids are basically, dirt's in the water. So,
Just from a bus depot.
yeah, right. So we can, this is an overview. This is the bus garage itself. This is the parking for the buses. And this is the end of the lot where we have these stone structures that we created and an area that you can actually collect water from. So initially the water was just being collected by first students testing people out of a puddle on the site. Well, that's kind of not the best way to collect the water. So we at least filtered the water and tried to collect it in an area that it was filtered. But we're still getting high iron and suspended solids. We can probably address, you can see here, the water washes over dirt and then down below. So as you said, it's just the dirt. We can probably create a grass strip along the back of the site. Water is going to start to filter through the higher grass, and we probably won't have the suspended solid issue that we have. So that's probably the answer to that one. The iron content, though, has been the challenge, because there's no steel on site, there's no rusting steel. It's not like a Sanford and Son site, right? So we are just trying to, it's not a junkyard, is what I'm saying. So it looks as if it could be from the stone. So they're ramping up the requirements to, we're going to test on the top of the site before the water crosses the site. We're going to test where it crosses the site. And we're going to test the actual stone itself. And we're going to stone that's been put on the site, stone that's been soiled, and see what might be happening. We asked DEP, what happens if it is the stone? They said, well, we'll cross that bridge when we get to it.
Yeah, that was going to be my question. What's the worst case here?
Right. So, I mean, it's stone coming from the quarry right next door. So we'll see. We're going to go through our series of testing. The next step for us now is to meet DEP on site, make sure that we're performing all of the tests exactly as they want us to before we perform the test. Then we'll do the testing, we'll submit the test, and see what the results are. We have to do this a couple times a year. Once we get this site resolved, we then have to revisit it at the Newtown bus garage, because it's a similar issue there. We want to rectify it here, figure out what we have to do, and then we'll be able to go there and say, here's what we're going to do. So that is really that. The professional services for playground study, that was brought up. People were suggesting donations, and there was some question of should we be taking care of playgrounds or should PTOs? And I understand that question. So we said, hey, why don't we get some proposals from a couple of professionals, have them do some studies, let us know what equipment should be considered for replacement, any safety-related issues, any ADA-related issues, and recommendations, along with coordinating with all the principals in kind of a little programming session like we would for any new building construction. If you could replace your playground, what ideally would be the equipment, special services for ADA equipment, what would you consider on each site, and develop this program, have them visit the site, then they'll ultimately put together a package for each site, a drawing that would show what would remain, what would be new, how we would address ADA sidewalks, any other work that we have to do related to that, and then a cost for each component. So we have this not only for us to see what we need to do district-wide for all the elementary schools, but also then incorporate it in the capital plan for each school, and we'll know exactly what we need to do down the road. And if you wanted to revisit PTO donations down the road for whatever reason, you would at least know at that time what piece of equipment you would be asking for in terms of a project. So we're not just putting things out there that might not mesh with an overall master plan. But in any case, we'll know what it would cost us if we want to consider it as part of summer projects and start, chipping away at this over summers. Say, hey, we'll do these 3 schools, next year those 3, and continue until we get all 10. So that's generally what they're required to do. They would provide us with those documents on a thumb drive so we could then use those in our plan as a tool. We look to Dewey Engineering because they have a sports-related division that they're very good at what they do. And T&M Associates, I talked to Schrader to get a number as well. Schrader deferred us to their civil engineer out of Philadelphia who they trust, and they do a lot of playground work. Both of these companies were providing a certified playground safety inspector as part of their process, so they'll be walking through looking for all the safety-related issues. Based on the numbers and the scope, I think I shared with you the matrix of the score for those. I'd recommend T&M for $22,000 for the entire package, which to me seems very reasonable based on what they're likely paying Innovative Playground Services to do most of the work, and then as master planners coordinating that on plans and preparing budgets and things. So those deliverables would be due to us in August. It gives them time to go out to the sites and do their studies and work with the programming and things like that. So if you're okay with it, I'll put this on as a consent agenda item for the next board meeting.
Questions?
I didn't have a question. I just wanted a comment. I just wanted to thank you for looking into this because I know after the Wrightstown PTO was asking about this, we had a really great conversation. So I just wanted to thank you for looking into it. It seems like T&M Associates is a good price. And even if we want to have PTOs contributing later, I just think it's great to have that already done instead of trying to think about, well, what should we do? And it's already done. So just thank you for spending time on it.
Well,
Other questions, or we'll just move it forward?
okay. The e-waste recycling event is coming up. That's April 23rd from 9 to noon at Council Rock South. We have this every year. It's usually a pretty successful event. They do responsibly recycle waste, and they pulverize anything of any importance in a computer, so there's no remnants of any memory or anything. I think some folks here have used them in the past. Now, they will charge you, though, if you bring a CRT, a cathode ray TV, an old tube TV, there is a charge to get rid of those TVs, because they have to pay to get rid of those TVs. You can't recycle those. They have to dispose of that responsibly. So it looks like a $30 charge for any TV like that. Otherwise, you can bring any of your electronics, and they will responsibly recycle and they'll divert it and go on the landfill, which is a good thing.
I've been in their facility, they really do, you give them a computer, the memory of the hard drive and stuff is usually either shredded or they have pneumatic machines that cut it up. Yeah. So, it's destroyed. And then they responsibly recycle every component they can, so.
Let me ask a question. Thanks. Just a quick question. How are we advertising this event?
I think it goes to our website, and
Jen will put it in the Friday
there's
newsletter.
a Friday thing, and
Good.
maybe we can ask in the superintendent's report to just mention it. coming out.
Okay, yeah.
If you could, I think
I
we
will
used to
add
do
that.
that as well.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
It'd be great to put it on social media too, like just
Channel,
if possible.
get us the info and give me the info and I'll channel it.
Thank you.
So then the agenda items is the credit change order, consent agenda, the T&M Associates, and CoStar's purchase for security. Those would be the three things on the upcoming agenda. And then this was just probable topics down the road. We know that we're not going to have this special meeting, that's not required. Then we'll be back in April for approval of the items we talked about tonight, the April board meeting. And option B and C timelines that we talked about earlier. So that is all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Weston?
Good question.
Yeah.
And actually, the recycle waste part brought it back, because I meant to ask during the Hillcrest, it's all fine stuff. The classrooms, are they getting the new screens in the classrooms? They look almost like TVs?
Yes.
Still about $5,000 a piece?
Yeah, they're expensive.
What is there a process in place, and what are the old ones in the schools? How are they handling? Because a couple months ago, you and I had a conversation about South had some issues with their overheads.
Right.
Do we have a process to start? Are we moving towards that district-wide? Or,
Well, I'll let Matt talk more to that part, but what we do, I always coordinate with Matt on every project, in terms of what technology, what backbone, all of that stuff. We work together, and we purchase that directly, and we give it to the contractors, because it saves us money, and it gets us what we want, because we can get it as late
in the new
as
buildings?
possible.
Yeah.
In the new building.
What are we doing with the older building? Is that budgeted? Are we starting the process of reworking?
We started a process last year. We replaced half of the interactive whiteboards at the high schools. In the next budget, or this year, I should say, half. Next year's budget, I budgeted to replace the other half. And then 2 years out, we'll start working in the elementary schools. We're going by the age of the devices in the classroom.
Okay.
We are still having issues with short throw projectors at the middle schools. So as their budgets allow, school budgets, they're replacing them because
What are the issues?
the short throw projectors don't work with the new math curriculum. So when we tested them, they worked. It was a timing thing. We bought the projectors.
Technology's
installed
not
them.
talking to each other.
No. 95% of what they need to do, they can do. It's just a couple of things they have issues with that they don't have with the smart displays. So where they can, we're starting to replace those in the math labs and in the science labs. They are on my list, but they're 5 or 6 years out to get to with the, it's just it's a budget.
What do you do when one breaks, though? I mean, you just fill them in now?
What do you mean?
Those short throw projectors, I mean, the ones at the middle schools are fairly new, right?
They're out of warranty.
But they're out of warranty. If one goes down, we don't leave the classroom without a
No,
short
we have a, because we've been replacing.
Didn't we store some?
Yes, because we've been
Yeah,
replacing the
Okay.
That's what I was going to ask.
smartboards, we've been
Yes.
storing projectors and backfilling those.
But there is a problem, would you say, at the middle school level?
At the middle school level, with the short throw projectors.
We don't use those anymore, right, the short throws?
No,
No.
we stopped using them after we did the middle schools, because what
That
happened
was
was.
a good idea that turned out to not be a good idea. It's really what happened. So I'm not blaming, I'm not throwing.
No,
We got the board on the wall now, so there's no.
Yeah, they're amazing.
It's basically like an iPad on a wall.
Yeah.
But it's also $5,000?
They're,
So the thing come down a little.
I think their cost is like $2,400.
They started at 5,000.
They started at 5, but we're down to about 24, and then the brackets are an extra, what, 300?
Something like that. It still feels like a lot more.
It's a lot of money. Yeah.
I expect you're not going to last as long as the wait.
For 12 years.
Okay, okay.
So-
So stand corrected.
Matt, when we, for example, did Wrightstown, we preserved some of the.
We did. We got halfway into Wrightstown and.
That's where we-
Matt
that's
raised
where
the flag and said, we got a problem, we can't
Right.
continue. We stopped, we put those in storage.
Yeah.
And then we went back and put in all of the new display screens that we still use today. And those that are stored in a climate-controlled storage that we have,
They're your middle school spares.
Yes.
they're spares for middle
Right.
schools. And
Everyone we take down, we use for cannibalizing.
And this is just material, but how do we work around the issue with the math program? I mean, you would know, so you're right. If you
Well,
don't
just
know-
to clarify that, I'm not, I know Matt said it's a new math program. We've been piloting math curriculum at the middle level, 6, 7, and 8 are grouped together in math programs. So I'm not exactly sure what that's in reference to because we haven't even selected a program yet. So and it's not been,
Yeah, so when I
I'm
say
not
new
aware of
math
any.
program, I'm talking about the one they put in right after we built the middle schools.
Okay.
So that is what, 6, 7 years ago, maybe
No, it's
longer.
not that.
Yeah, I mean, they've only been in the schools for 3 years, right?
Those middle schools have been built longer than
18.
18, so,
Okay.
yeah, so,
Yeah, there was a shift.
Oh, then you would know. I
yeah.
remember this.
But we haven't, I mean, middle school, there's not been a new math program in that time. We've done algebra, some work with algebra, but nothing in the math curriculum to my knowledge, so. But I know that there are issues with things not working with those projectors that teachers have struggled with because just it's not functioning the way it's supposed to. And it's not, in my understanding, it's not just in math. It's,
We just hear from the math teachers.
They probably depend on them. Yeah. Okay. Well, okay, so I asked one question, got a whole other, sorry about that.
No, that's good.
I know, no, but the reason I keep asking is because I know when we did one of the schools, it was like $5,000. I'm like, how do you,
Yeah.
what is that gonna cost to sell funds to? With times 30 something.
Well, we're buying in bulk now, and the prices have gone down before the pandemic. They haven't gone up yet, but they probably will.
Those are touch screens, right?
They're beautiful.
They're amazing.
It's like a giant iPad on the
Yeah,
wall.
yeah.
But the advantage of that is because it's like an iPad, it's running software that can be updated on a regular basis. So it's an advantage over projectors and the smart boards, which the software, you have to have everything coordinated to work better. So they're a much better solution for the classroom because we can continue to update them. That's why I say 12, I think we're going to probably get 15 to 16 years out of them, but
It's amazing.
It's very, what happens is I'll go to back to school night and I sit in the classroom and then I'm texting Matt, for the love of God, get this teacher a new projector because I can barely see it. She's got to turn off the lights in order to see.
Yeah.
And that's where, I mean, and I know Ed sees it at the middle schools and that's all. It's just, I walk into them and then I feel bad because.
Well, no, I feel bad when I walk in Holland, they have the older ones, nothing against what's going on, but you're like, wow, if you guys ever want the rights down, you'd really be shocked.
Yeah, you don't want to.
Thanks, Doug, I just wanted to make sure that was a part of the new process.
Other questions?
Great, thank you.
I think we're adjourned. Thank you.
No,
everybody.
public comment.
Oh, I'm sorry, Nikki.
Oh, no, not bad.
All right.
Sorry.
Very good.
Thank you, sir.
Now we're adjourned.
Thank you.